Intensity is often misunderstood as something that happens instantly, like a spark that appears out of nowhere. People are taught to believe that if something is powerful, it must be fast. If it is real, it must be immediate. But psychological reality tells a very different story. Intensity does not come from speed, it comes from anticipation. Anticipation is a process that engages the mind before the experience fully unfolds. It stretches a moment. It creates space between what is happening and what might happen next. In that space, the brain becomes active. It predicts, imagines, wonders, and prepares. That mental activity is what amplifies emotional experience. When everything happens quickly, the nervous system barely has time to register meaning. Fast experiences can feel exciting, but they often lack depth because there is no time for emotional layering. Anticipation, however, allows emotion to build gradually. Each small moment adds another layer of expectation, curiosity, and awareness. This is why waiting can feel so powerful. Waiting is not empty time, waiting is psychological engagement. The mind fills the gap with possibility, and possibility is emotionally stimulating. The brain begins to assign value before the event even occurs. In many cases, the anticipation becomes more intense than the moment itself. Human attention plays a critical role here. What we anticipate, we focus on. What we focus on, we feel more strongly. Attention magnifies emotional response. When something unfolds slowly, attention stays active longer, and the experience becomes more memorable. There is also a neurological component to anticipation. The brain's reward system activates not only when something happens, but when we expect it to happen. That expectation creates tension, not negative tension, but psychological tension, a sense of leaning forward internally. That leaning forward is the foundation of intensity. Speed removes that tension. When something happens too quickly, there is no build. Without a build, there is less emotional investment. The experience may be dramatic, but it is often fleeting. Anticipation, on the other hand, creates investment. The person becomes emotionally involved before the peak moment arrives. Another important element is uncertainty. Anticipation thrives on uncertainty. When outcomes are not fully predictable, the brain stays alert. Alertness increases sensitivity. Small signals feel bigger. Small changes feel meaningful. This is how intensity grows, not through force, but through awareness. However, anticipation is not simply about delay, it is about pacing. Healthy pacing allows moments to breathe. It allows emotional processing to happen in real time. When pacing is intentional, people feel the progression of an experience rather than being rushed through it. This progression creates narrative. Humans are wired for narrative. We remember journeys more than flashes. Anticipation turns an experience into a journey. Each step matters because each step signals that something is building. There is also a psychological safety component. When intensity builds slowly, the nervous system has time to adjust. Adjustment reduces overwhelm and increases receptivity. Instead of reacting defensively, a person becomes open. Openness deepens emotional impact. Many people chase fast intensity because it feels convincing. Speed can create the illusion of importance. But sustainable intensity, the kind that leaves a lasting impression, almost always develops gradually. It grows through repeated attention, small signals, emotional consistency, and the quiet expansion of expectation. Anticipation also strengthens memory. The brain encodes experiences more deeply when there is emotional build-up beforehand. The waiting, the noticing, the wondering, all of these become part of the memory structure. The experience is not just a moment, it becomes a sequence. Sequences carry meaning. Ultimately, intensity is less about what happens and more about how the mind arrives there. When something unfolds slowly, the mind participates. Participation creates ownership. Ownership creates emotional weight. This is why anticipation is so powerful. It transforms passive experience into active engagement. It turns moments into stories. It allows emotion to expand rather than spike. Speed creates reaction. Anticipation creates depth, and depth is where true intensity lies. The human brain is not designed to respond most strongly to sudden emotional spikes. It is designed to respond to patterns, progression, and gradual change. A slow emotional build gives the brain time to notice, interpret, and attach meaning to what is happening. Meaning is what transforms a simple moment into a powerful emotional experience. When emotions emerge gradually, the brain stays engaged for a longer period of time. Engagement increases awareness. Awareness increases sensitivity. Instead of reacting once and moving on, the mind continues to monitor the experience, searching for signals, changes, and cues. This ongoing monitoring deepens emotional impact. A gradual emotional build allows the nervous system to move step by step. Each small shift becomes significant because it signals movement. The brain is highly responsive to movement and change, even subtle ones. When emotional signals unfold slowly, the brain tracks the progression, and that tracking creates psychological investment. Investment is crucial. The more the brain invests attention in something, the more important it begins to feel. Importance is not always determined by the event itself, but by how much mental energy is directed toward it. Gradual emotional experiences naturally invite more mental energy because they extend across time. Time is one of the most underestimated factors in emotional intensity. When something happens quickly, the brain processes it as a single event. When something develops slowly, the brain processes it as a sequence. Sequences are more meaningful because they create context. Context allows the brain to interpret not just what is happening, but what it represents. Another reason gradual emotional build is powerful is predictability mixed with uncertainty. The brain looks for patterns, but it also reacts strongly when patterns are incomplete. A slow progression gives enough information to stay engaged while leaving enough unknown to maintain curiosity. Curiosity keeps emotional systems active. The reward system in the brain plays a major role here. Anticipation of an emotional outcome can activate reward pathways before the outcome occurs. This means the brain begins to experience emotional response during the build, not just at the peak. The experience becomes extended rather than momentary. Extended experiences create stronger memory encoding. The brain remembers emotional journeys more vividly than isolated emotional bursts. When feelings evolve gradually, multiple memory points are created, small moments of noticing, interpreting, and feeling. These layered memory points strengthen recall and perceived intensity. Gradual emotional build also reduces shock and increases absorption. Sudden emotional spikes can overwhelm the nervous system, causing it to shut down or move into protection mode. When the build is slower, the nervous system remains regulated. Regulation allows emotion to be felt more fully rather than resisted. There is also a cognitive component. As emotion builds, the mind begins to create narrative. Humans naturally construct stories to understand experiences. A slow emotional progression provides material for that story. Each moment becomes part of a larger meaning structure, and meaning amplifies emotional response. Attention again becomes central. The brain prioritizes what unfolds over time because sustained exposure signals relevance. If something continues rather than disappearing quickly, the brain assumes it matters. This assumption increases focus, and focus magnifies emotional experience. Subtlety is another powerful factor. Small emotional cues repeated over time can become more impactful than a single dramatic cue. The brain is extremely sensitive to repetition with variation. When emotional signals shift slightly but consistently, the mind detects growth, and growth creates momentum. Momentum is what people often describe as intensity. It is not a single strong moment, but the feeling that something is building and moving forward. The brain responds strongly to momentum because it suggests direction, and direction suggests significance. Gradual emotional build also allows interpretation to evolve. Early moments may feel neutral or unclear, but as the experience continues, the brain revises its understanding. This reinterpretation process strengthens emotional impact because the meaning feels discovered rather than imposed. Discovery is inherently engaging. When the brain feels like it is uncovering something step by step, emotional response becomes more personal. Personal meaning is always stronger than immediate stimulation. In many ways, the brain values progression over peak. Peaks are memorable, but progression is what gives peaks their power. Without a build, a peak lacks contrast. Without contrast, emotional intensity feels flatter. The brain responds to contrast, movement, narrative, and anticipation, all of which are created through gradual emotional development. This is why experiences that unfold slowly often feel deeper, more immersive, and more significant. Ultimately, the strength of emotional response is not just about how strong a moment is, but how the brain arrives there. When emotion has time to grow, the mind participates in the process. Participation creates connection, and connection is what amplifies emotional experience. Uncertainty is often uncomfortable for people because the mind prefers predictability. Predictability creates a sense of control, and control creates psychological safety. Yet at the same time, the human brain is highly responsive to uncertainty because uncertainty demands attention. When something is not fully known, the mind naturally leans in. Attention is a limited resource. The brain constantly decides what deserves focus and what can be ignored. Certainty allows the brain to conserve energy. Once something is predictable, it becomes background. Uncertainty does the opposite. It signals that something requires monitoring, interpretation, and awareness. This is why uncertainty increases focus and engagement. When outcomes are unclear, the brain shifts into an active processing mode. It begins scanning for cues, looking for patterns, and trying to reduce the unknown. This scanning process keeps attention locked in place. Instead of drifting away, the mind stays present because it is waiting for information that resolves the uncertainty. This heightened presence is a key ingredient in emotional intensity. Experiences feel stronger when attention is concentrated. It is not always the event itself that creates impact, but the level of focus directed toward it. Uncertainty acts like a magnet for focus because unresolved situations naturally hold cognitive space. There is also a predictive function at work. The brain is constantly trying to guess what will happen next. When prediction is easy, engagement drops. When prediction is difficult, engagement rises. The gap between expectation and outcome becomes psychologically stimulating. The mind continues updating its predictions, which keeps it invested in the unfolding experience. This investment builds emotional momentum. Each moment of uncertainty creates a small internal question. Questions generate curiosity. Curiosity keeps attention alive. Over time, that sustained attention transforms into deeper involvement. The person is no longer passively experiencing something, they are actively trying to understand it. Uncertainty also enhances sensitivity. When the brain is searching for information, it becomes more responsive to subtle signals. Small changes feel meaningful because they might provide clarity. This increased sensitivity amplifies perception, and amplified perception often feels like increased intensity. Another important factor is variability. Predictable patterns become easy to ignore because they require little processing. Variable patterns demand interpretation. Even slight unpredictability can prevent the brain from disengaging. Engagement continues because the mind cannot fully automate its response. This does not mean constant chaos creates stronger connection. Too much uncertainty overwhelms the nervous system and creates anxiety. The most engaging experiences contain partial uncertainty, enough unknown to maintain curiosity, but enough stability to preserve safety. This balance keeps the brain attentive without triggering avoidance. When uncertainty is balanced, it creates a psychological state often described as anticipation. Anticipation is essentially focused uncertainty combined with expectation. The mind senses that something is coming but does not know exactly when or how. That state keeps emotional systems active over time. The brain's reward system contributes to this process. Not knowing when a meaningful moment will occur can increase responsiveness when it does occur. Variable timing makes outcomes feel more significant because they are less guaranteed. This mechanism explains why unpredictability can strengthen perceived value. Memory is also influenced by uncertainty. Experiences that required interpretation are often remembered more vividly because the brain worked harder to process them. Effort strengthens encoding. When the mind spends time analyzing signals, those signals become more deeply embedded in memory. There is also a narrative effect. Uncertainty creates open loops in the mind. Humans naturally seek closure. Until closure occurs, attention returns repeatedly to the unresolved situation. This repeated mental return reinforces engagement and extends the emotional lifespan of the experience. Focus created by uncertainty is not purely cognitive, it is physiological. The nervous system becomes alert, not necessarily stressed, but attentive. This alertness increases awareness of internal sensations, thoughts, and emotional shifts. Greater awareness often translates into stronger perceived experience. Importantly, uncertainty invites meaning making. When information is incomplete, the mind fills gaps with interpretation. Interpretation personalizes the experience. Personalization increases emotional relevance. Relevance increases intensity. Certainty closes the process. Uncertainty keeps it open. An open psychological process allows emotion to evolve rather than conclude quickly. The mind continues interacting with the experience, revisiting it, analyzing it, and anticipating what comes next. That ongoing interaction is what sustains engagement. In many cases, people assume engagement comes from dramatic events. In reality, engagement often comes from unresolved ones. The absence of complete information keeps attention active far longer than immediate clarity would. Uncertainty, when balanced with safety, becomes a powerful driver of focus. It encourages curiosity, heightens sensitivity, strengthens memory, and sustains attention across time. Focus is not forced in these situations. It emerges naturally because the mind is wired to resolve the unknown. And when attention remains present, experiences feel deeper, more vivid, and more emotionally significant. Emotional pacing is one of the most overlooked elements in human connection, yet it plays a critical role in how deeply an experience is felt. Many people focus on what is said or what is done, but far fewer pay attention to when things happen. Timing shapes perception, rhythm shapes meaning. Emotional pacing is what allows connection to move from surface interaction into something more layered and meaningful. When experiences unfold too quickly, the nervous system often shifts into reaction rather than reflection. Reaction is immediate and protective. Reflection is slower and integrative. Emotional pacing creates space for reflection, and reflection is where deeper connection forms. Without that space, moments can feel intense but not necessarily meaningful. Pacing allows emotion to breathe. Each emotional signal needs time to be noticed, interpreted, and integrated before the next signal arrives. When signals stack too fast, they blur together. When they are spaced with intention, each one carries weight. This spacing is what transforms interaction into experience. The brain naturally looks for rhythm in human interaction. Rhythm provides predictability, and predictability creates safety, but rhythm does not mean sameness. Healthy emotional pacing involves variation, moments of closeness, moments of pause, moments of clarity, and moments of curiosity. This variation prevents emotional fatigue while maintaining engagement. Pauses are especially powerful. Many people view pauses as absence, but psychologically they function as processing time. During a pause, the brain organizes information and assigns meaning. Meaning strengthens emotional impact. Without pauses, there is less opportunity for meaning to form, and experiences may feel fleeting even if they were intense. Emotional pacing also influences trust. Trust rarely develops in a single moment. It grows through repeated signals delivered over time. When pacing is steady and consistent, the nervous system begins to expect continuity. That expectation reduces vigilance and increases openness. Openness is essential for connection. Another important element is emotional tolerance. People differ in how quickly they can process emotional information. Intentional pacing respects this difference. When experiences move at a pace the nervous system can handle, individuals feel more capable of staying present. Presence deepens engagement because it allows emotion to be felt rather than managed. Fast escalation can create the illusion of closeness. It may feel compelling, but without pacing, the experience often lacks stability. Stability is what allows emotion to accumulate instead of spike and disappear. Emotional pacing supports accumulation by ensuring that each moment builds on the previous one. There is also a psychological contrast effect. Slower pacing increases contrast between moments, and contrast enhances perception. When shifts are noticeable, they feel meaningful. Subtle progression becomes visible because the mind has time to register change. Registered change is experienced as growth, and growth strengthens connection. Pacing contributes to emotional regulation as well. Gradual progression gives the nervous system time to adapt. Adaptation prevents overwhelm. When overwhelm is reduced, people remain receptive. Receptivity allows emotion to deepen rather than trigger defense. This is why pacing is closely tied to emotional safety. Consistency within pacing matters as much as speed. Erratic pacing can create confusion, which shifts attention toward uncertainty rather than connection. Intentional pacing, however, creates coherence. Coherence helps the brain understand the direction of an interaction, and direction supports emotional investment. Emotional pacing also supports narrative formation. Humans interpret experiences as stories, and stories require sequence. Sequence depends on timing. When moments are spaced appropriately, the mind naturally links them together into a meaningful progression. That progression becomes the emotional memory of the experience. Importantly, pacing allows anticipation to develop. Anticipation is not only about waiting, it is about sensing movement. When pacing is effective, each moment hints at the next without rushing toward it. This sense of forward motion sustains attention and increases emotional involvement. There is a difference between intensity and depth. Intensity can happen quickly, but depth requires time. Emotional pacing is what converts intensity into depth. It ensures that emotion is not just felt strongly, but felt meaningfully. Meaning is what makes experiences memorable. Another subtle effect of pacing is that it encourages presence from both sides. When interaction is rushed, attention can fragment. When pacing is intentional, attention stabilizes. Stable attention allows individuals to notice nuance, and nuance is where connection becomes more complex and real. Pacing does not mean slowing everything down. It means aligning emotional movement with the nervous system's capacity to process. Sometimes pacing involves moving forward. Sometimes it involves holding space. The key is responsiveness rather than speed. Over time, effective emotional pacing creates continuity. Continuity gives experiences a sense of direction and coherence. When people feel that progression is unfolding naturally, they become more willing to stay engaged. Engagement strengthens emotional impact because it extends the duration of attention and meaning-making. Ultimately, emotional pacing is what allows connection to evolve rather than simply occur. It transforms isolated moments into a sequence that feels intentional, understandable, and meaningful. When experiences move with rhythm instead of urgency, the nervous system relaxes, attention deepens, and connection has the opportunity to grow in ways that feel both powerful and sustainable. Anticipation activates imagination, and imagination plays a central role in how humans experience emotion. What people imagine often carries as much emotional weight as what actually happens. When anticipation is present, the mind does not remain passive. It begins constructing possibilities, scenarios, and meanings before the moment arrives. This mental activity intensifies emotional experience because the brain is already engaged. Imagination fills the space between events. In that space, the mind explores outcomes, predicts reactions, and attaches personal meaning. This process creates emotional rehearsal. Emotional rehearsal makes future moments feel familiar, significant, and sometimes more intense than they would be without that preparation. The experience is no longer just an event, it becomes something the mind has already interacted with. Memory is closely connected to this process. The brain does not store experiences as isolated snapshots. It stores them as networks of associations. Anticipation strengthens these networks because the mind repeatedly returns to the expected moment. Adds another layer of menin of shinoselfenshin and correcti when is tetatsin, which comes deepens encoding. When anticipation is present, small details become more noticeable. The mind is actively searching for signals that confirm or challenge its expectations. This increased noticing creates additional memory points. Instead of remembering one moment, the brain remembers a sequence of moments: the noticing, the wondering, the interpreting, and finally the experiencing. This sequence is why anticipated experiences often feel more meaningful. Meaning is built through repeated mental engagement. The more time the mind spends thinking about something, the more importance it assigns to it. Importance amplifies emotional response, and amplified emotion strengthens memory. Imagination also personalizes anticipation. Each person feels uncertainty with their own interpretations, shaped by past experiences, beliefs, and emotional needs. This personalization increases emotional relevance because the imagined possibilities reflect internal narratives. Experiences that connect to internal narratives are remembered more vividly. Another important factor is emotional priming. Anticipation prepares the nervous system to feel. The brain begins adjusting before the event occurs, creating readiness. Readiness heightens sensitivity. When the moment finally happens, the nervous system is already activated, which can make the experience feel stronger and more immersive. Anticipation extends emotional time. Instead of emotion existing only during the event, it exists before, during, and after. This extended emotional timeline creates more opportunities for memory formation. The brain records not just what happened, but the entire emotional journey surrounding it. Imagination can also amplify contrast. When the mind imagines possibilities, it creates expectations. The real experience is then compared to those expectations. This comparison increases awareness of differences and similarities, both of which strengthen perception. Stronger perception leads to stronger memory. Importantly, anticipation does not require certainty about what will happen. In fact, incomplete information often stimulates imagination more. When details are missing, the mind becomes creative. Creativity is emotionally engaging because it involves active participation. Participation deepens emotional investment, and investment reinforces memory. The brain's reward system contributes as well. Anticipated rewards can activate emotional circuits before the reward occurs. This early activation links positive feeling with the expected moment, increasing its perceived significance. Even neutral experiences can feel more meaningful when they have been anticipated. Repetition is another key element. Anticipation often involves returning mentally to the same expected event multiple times. Repetition signals importance to the brain. When something is revisited repeatedly, the brain assumes it matters and strengthens the memory pathways associated with it. There is also a narrative effect. Anticipation creates a beginning before the main event. This beginning provides context, and context supports memory organization. Experiences with context are easier to recall because they fit into a story structure. Stories are the brain's preferred way of storing meaning. Anticipation encourages reflection as well. After the experience occurs, the mind compares what happened with what was imagined. This comparison process revisits the event again, reinforcing memory. Each reflection strengthens the emotional imprint because the brain reactivates the original experience. Imagination can sometimes intensify emotion beyond reality, but this does not reduce its psychological impact. The brain responds to perceived meaning as strongly as it responds to objective events. If anticipation created meaning, that meaning becomes part of the memory regardless of accuracy. Another subtle effect is that anticipation increases attentional readiness. When people expect something, they are more likely to notice it fully when it happens. Noticing fully leads to richer encoding, more sensory detail, more emotional context, and more cognitive interpretation. Rich encoding produces stronger recall. Over time, anticipated experiences often become anchor memories. They stand out not just because of what occurred, but because of how much mental space surrounded them. The anticipation becomes inseparable from the experience itself. Ultimately, anticipation activates imagination, and imagination expands emotional experience across time. This expansion creates multiple points of engagement, deeper meaning, and stronger memory pathways. The event becomes more than a moment. It becomes a process the mind participated in, and participation is what turns experience into memory that lasts.